Are you tired of not being able to catch a big bass? Is your friends always making fun of you because you can't catch a big one? Well, then you need to stay tuned for this week's Bowser Big Bass Tip. Let's go. This week's Bowser's Big Bass Tip, we're talking about line selection. When do you want to choose braid? When do you want to choose fluorocarbon? Or when do you want to use monofilament? Well, I'm going to try to make that easy for you because honestly, it really isn't that complicated. So to start off with, I want to make it really easy for y'all at home. 90% of the time, I use fluorocarbon. Just like this cigar right here, it's a great sensitive fluorocarbon, and there's several reasons I use fluorocarbon. Number one being, it's a really sensitive line. It gives you that added sensitivity that you need to feel everything on the bottom or those subtle bites that you might have, especially early in the year. Secondly, it gives a really subtle presentation. And the third reason is it doesn't have a whole lot of stretch to it. The second line I want to talk to y'all about is monofilament. And again, this is a really easy one. I exclusively only use monofilament whenever it comes to a topwater bait like a buzz bait or a popper or something like that, because monofilament really doesn't have the subtle presentation that fluorocarbon does. It doesn't have the sensitivity, so it's not good for filling things on the bottom, but it does float really well. So it really helps with your top water presentation because your bait's not trying to fight a sinking line. Now, the one nice thing about monofilament is since it's not as sensitive, it does have more forgiveness in it, which with a top water bite is actually kind of helpful for most people because a lot of times top water bites are big blow ups that'll really get you excited. And with this little bit of stretch that you're going to have with monofilament, it's not going to pull that bait away from the fish. The third and final line I want to talk to y'all about is braid. Now with braid, I very rarely use braid, and it's simply because it doesn't have a whole lot of forgiveness to it. So it is easy to pull that bait right out of the fish's mouth. But for me personally, I really like to use braid whenever I'm throwing like a frog around a lot of vegetation, or if I'm flipping heavy vegetation, or if there's a lot of grass or rocks or stuff that's really going to be cutting up my line. And I know that I'm not going to need as much of a subtle presentation. You just got to make sure if you're using braid, you really try to soften up your hook set. You got to adjust your hook set, which for most people makes fishing a little bit more complicated. But braid does have its purpose, and it does work really well around areas that you're going to be cutting up your line a lot. I hope you all enjoyed this week's Bowser Big Bass Tip. My name's Jordan, and if you enjoyed this experience, make sure you're clicking that like and subscribe button, and I'll see y'all next time.